Welcome to Normal Island Live. I'm Curtis Daly, and my God, it is boiling hot. I don't have a fan down here. It sucks. I had to have a shower just before. That's why my hair is all bloody wet. I hope everyone at home isn't struggling too much. And I'm really excited to be joined by the one and only, really good friend of the show, Helena, aka NoJusticeMTG. How are you handling the heat today?
I luckily do have a fan in front of me in here, but it is still incredibly warm. I went to Tesco and bought like one of those like £1.20 boxes full of like ice lollies. All of them gone. Ate
Really?
all of them.
What
Ate
flavor?
all of
Tell me
them.
what flavor you got.
They were like orange, lemon, and strawberry, I think.
You know what I really like? I think it's the Solero. It's the soft inside, and you got the slightly harder shell. You know?
I don't mind the Slayer, but there's just something about like it all just being ice in this kind of weather that just
Mm.
was what I needed. It's what I needed today.
Well, you're probably going to need a lot more because it's. I don't think it's cooling down. Um, but not for a couple of
And
days.
the
But
show tonight is
yes,
going to be hot.
it's going to be on fire. It absolutely is. In fact, we've got a jam-packed show. We always say that we try and keep the show to an hour and a quarter. Okay. There's a lot to cover tonight, so I don't know if that's going to happen. But it's going to be a great show. Now, of course, remember to like the stream. Make sure you're subscribed and hit the notification bell. Now, if you want to support us, then you can go to turnleftmedia.co.uk/support to help fund our work. Remember, you can also become a YouTube member for 99p. Let's go on to our first story. So, with all the noise surrounding the scandals with Nigel Farage and his announcement that he will be resigning as an MP and will stand in a by election, it's not just him who is embroiled with potential financial corruption. Deputy Reform leader Richard Tice, it has been revealed that he also took money from convicted fraudster George Cottrell. Breaking. The Telegraph reports George Cottrell's mother made a £1 million payment to Richard Tice's company, half of which was donated to Reform, and that George Cottrell loaned £80,000 to Tice. We approached Fiona Cottrell about the above before our piece. She wouldn't comment. Now, the Sunday Times have already reported that Richard Tice's company broke the law by failing to pay at least £90,000 in tax, that a network of his shell companies failed to pay a further £100,000 in tax, benefiting his firm, which donated to Reform, and that he used a loophole to avoid paying £600,000. Dodgy dick. Now, Tice has come out and accused the National Crime Agency of leaking information to the press. Reform accuses National Crime Agency of leaking bank statements. I believe someone at NCA leaked company statements, bank transfer information, and private conversations with my bank managers to The Guardian. I'm seeking inquiry and police must investigate NCA. Now, I feel like Tice has accidentally admitted something here. I mean, why does the NCA have these bank details? I mean, that's kind of a major self-report now. No, look, you can shoot the messenger, but clearly Tice's activity is noteworthy that it's been recorded in the NCA. But there's more. It can now be revealed that separately, banking staff judged that transfers of funds between Richard Tice, the party's deputy leader and major donor, Fiona Cottrell, and the senior party figure and convicted fraudster George Cottrell required further investigation, according to finance industry sources. Tice, via lawyers, threatened to injunct The Guardian to stop it publishing these details. The Guardian understands finance industry figures have raised at least 4 suspicious activity reports relating to concerns about transactions involving senior figures in Reform. One relates to a £1 million donation made to Britain Means Business, a fundraising organisation for Reform UK, before the last general election. Half of the £1 million was then transferred by Tice as director of the company to Reform UK. Renamed from Leave Means Leave, Britain Means Business is a company that is used to help fund reform. The £1 million seemingly came from the aristocrat and Reform UK donor Fiona Cottrell. In this instance, The Guardian understands bank staff were not satisfied that the funds had ultimately come from her. The NCA has sought help from a foreign partner agency to trace the original source of the funds. Two other SARs relate to a loan from George Cottrell to Tice. The loan was made shortly before Tice finalised a property purchase and made a party donation, and that was not repaid until after those transactions were completed. Now, most of the media attention is on Farage, but it's important to note that this isn't an individual issue. The entire Reform Party has been embroiled with scandals. Having said that, it is more bad news for Farage. After claiming that the £5 million gift from Christopher Harben was an unconditional reward, there are questions about the origin of that money. The £5 million has been reported to the NCA with concerns that the money could have been laundered. Now, this is serious. This is potentially a criminal activity, not just breaking the parliamentary rules. But the Guardian reports this. The £5 million gift to Nigel Farage by a cryptocurrency billionaire was reported to the National Crime Agency by bankers who were concerned it may have been laundered money. According to financial industry sources, Farage received at least some of the £5 million after he had announced on the 23rd of May 2024 that he was not going to stand for Parliament, saying it was not the right time for me. The balance of the £5 million was received after he had ruled himself out, and shortly before he said he would run for the seat of Clacton in Essex. Harben's lawyers have claimed Farage received the money on the 5th of April 2024. They did not provide a substantive response to detailed questions on the gift and a suspicious activity reports to the NCA. Instead, they asked for a copy of any documents in the Guardian's possession. In one of the letters sent to the Guardian, Farage said he did not know about the SAR. He added, "I have no reason to doubt the ultimate source of the money." He also repeated unsubstantiated accusations that the information had been illegally obtained by this newspaper. Helena, do you think we could see the destruction of the Reform Party? It's not just Nigel Farage implicated, but potentially Richard Tice too.
I mean, a lot of these people, I think, had the level to which they didn't realise that there would be this much scrutiny, you know? Because none of these people have ever actually been politicians before. Yeah, I know Nigel Farage has been in the European Parliament, sure, I guess, but is that a real elected role? Sorry, Ellie. But, like, when it comes to the actual scrutiny of being a politician in this country, I don't think any of them realise the level of actual reporting there would be on the things that they were doing, you know? Again, it seems all above board in terms of, like, the ways in which that they must have seen it. But in loads of different ways, they are doing things that have precedent that they should be following, and they didn't realise necessarily, potentially, that they could have even had to follow in a lot of cases. Remember, so when it comes to cryptocurrency donations, so I was talking with Lewis from Turn Left, who you should go and follow on TikTok, on Saturday about this stuff, right? And there's the difference between, like, permissible and impermissible donors, right? And they've had to learn pretty quickly that you need to be able to have, like, permissible donors, like, transferring cryptocurrency into the right wallet to be able to donate, which means that the actual source of that transaction could be from anywhere. Right? So as far as they're concerned, I think, well, it's coming from this particular industry, this particular person at this particular time, so that's all above board. But it's far more complex than just the last person who ever sent them money. And again, on top of all of this, when it comes to the kind of people who they are fraternizing with, these are probably people who've come from very privileged backgrounds. In lots of cases, we know the privileged backgrounds these people have come from. They're from the aristocracy, they've gone to private schools, they've gone to the upper echelons of society with the filthiest of the richest people in this country. Obviously, they're in the social circles of billionaires and the social circles of people who broadly very rarely get touched by power. They broadly have power, let them alone, because that is how capitalism will work, right? That's always been the way of capitalism. But once you get involved in politics, that scrutiny kicks up a notch. They're not used to having this level of scrutiny, this level to which they have to have everything above board. And the fact that things have been reported to the National Crime Agency is a real Rubicon that's been crossed here, rather than just whether did they follow parliamentary rules or not. Because at the end of the day, I think that when it comes, for example, to the by-election that's coming up quite soon, Nigel Farage saying, well, people out there don't really care about the parliamentary rules, they care about the policies. And I think that probably is true for a lot of people out there, right? Like, I don't think that he's necessarily wrong to say that people are more concerned with, is the country actually getting better, rather than are all of the people following the rules to the letter of the law, to the letter of the kind of parliamentary standards. But when it comes to the actual law, that's totally different. If these things are being scrutinized for potential legal complication, that changes the game. That changes the whole game here. Because the right wing, they've always prided themselves on being the supporters of law and order. They've always prided themselves as being the party that want to follow the law to its letter, regardless of whether they believe in the actual utility of the laws that are being passed. Whether they agree with them or not, they believe in the concept of everyone following the law. But it's what's weird is how when it comes to white-collar law, the lines go a bit blurry, don't they? They like to point at all of the crime that's happening, that's very visible, violent crime, whatever it is. But as soon as it comes to scrutiny of financial transactions, when it looks at like money laundering, for example, given that one of the actual sources potentially of a donor is somebody who's been convicted of money laundering, then it's going too far. This is too much scrutiny. This is the establishment trying to come down. No, this is a real legal problem that you've got going here. And I think that the public more broadly won't take it as lightly as did you correctly follow the rules or not with regards to reporting donations as per like being elected member of parliament, because legal complications, that's a whole different kettle of fish.
I think you're probably right to say that most people might not care about parliamentary rules. A lot of people won't know how it works, what the rules are. So like I can understand from Reform's and Nigel Farage's perspective to say, look, no one cares about this sort of stuff. What I do think, though, is the ongoing stories. That keeps dragging on and more scandals. People are going to get the idea that this guy's a dodgy bloke. But you do tend to hear from people, I know Farage is probably corrupt, but they're all corrupt. And that's quite depressing because, I mean, sure, a lot of our MPs are corrupt, but one, it doesn't mean that Nigel Farage gets off the hook. But two, he is that much more corrupt as well. So I do think, like, people do care more about material conditions.
Oh, it's a different level of corruption here, isn't it? Like
there is
getting glasses being given to you that you have reported, right? Like people were attacking Keir Starmer correctly because of the perceived conflict of interest of his relationships with rich people that were giving him free stuff as like you don't get something for nothing. And then Nigel Farage, the person who's making those pointed and real criticisms of Keir Starmer, can't come out here and say, well, this £5 million unconditional gift was in no way due to any services that were rendered, right? There's no way you can say that there wasn't potential conflict of interest here, given that he made the same critique of Keir Starmer for something of a considerably lower value, right? Like, these things don't really wash. What you've also have noticed, right? A lot of the newspapers that come out with this stuff, save for, of course, The Guardian, which is very left-wing, or very left-wing in comparison to the rest of the media outlet in this country, rather, is what I should say, is that the papers that have come up with this latest stuff, they're right-wing papers. It's the Times that have come out with some of these things. They are owned by the Murdoch family. That's a right-wing kind of organisation. Even the Telegraph have come out against Nigel Farage and some of these receipts that have been provided in terms of the reporting over the last few days, which shows that maybe the right-wing media, they're ready to get behind Kemi Badenoch. Maybe they've realised that the goose is cooked on reform if these things have started coming out now, and they're willing to pile it on to try and stop a vote split on the right to be able to support the Tories over the Labour Party. Because at the end of the day, if you're somebody who works in capital, which is who the people who own all of these newspapers are, right? The one thing that you really care about is just having a quiet country with low taxation, low regulation for you to do business. An authoritarian alt-right party getting into office, actually, it's bad for business. Look at Donald Trump in the United States right now. Is America a good place to do business? Not really, if your workforce are going to get deported and sent to a concentration camp in El Salvador, right? Like, you can't really do menial labour for below minimum wage if you're in an El Salvadorian gulag, can you? And I'm assuming these people are like, well, do we really want to risk it with Nigel Farage destabilising the country? Would we rather have boring neoliberal capitalism from Kemi Badenoch, and also to ensure that she does get into office rather than having the right-wing vote split with Nigel Farage potentially allowing Labour to remain in office?
Do you think, though, that like the Times is 200 years old, the Telegraph is a very old paper? Do you think there is an element of they're so institutionalized that like they don't like the Nigel Farages? Like they would back him if need be, if there was a threat of a left-wing figure. But do you think there is a sense of properness, old school conservatism, that they would happily obviously support the Conservatives, but Nigel Farage is something different? Do you think it's that, or do you genuinely think, do you know what, it's because they think Farage is a dead horse, they better back Kemi? Because whilst it's the Murdoch press, there is some good investigative journalism at the Times.
I mean, when it comes specifically to Pogred and Maguire, like, I do think these people do genuinely care about the work that they do, although, you know, the work that they do in a lot of cases is stuff that other people have done, that they have the lawyers that they can afford to protect, right? Like, I'm not going to say much more than that before people get angry with me. But do they actually care about adhering to the rules? For sure. But when it comes to like the Times as an organisation, I'm less confident that it's about, you know, adherence to process rather than it is about wanting to be able to do the right things for the Murdoch media. Because would I say this of the Times pre-Murdoch acquisition, that they were there because they were, you know, an asset for the British state, I mean, for the British kind of tradition, I guess? Sure. Post-Murdoch, no, I don't think so.
Yeah, fair enough. Let's move on. It's sticking with reform. There's a lot of reform talk today, unfortunately. But let's move on. Robert Jenrick is back on the airwaves, and he's worse than ever in attempting to once again defend Nigel Farage. He's managed to outdo his last performances.
We've had parts of the media, Sky News, banging on the door of Nigel's daughter's house, someone who has obviously nothing to do with public life. Enough is enough. Nigel is sick of the way that the old political establishment and their media friends are treating him, because ultimately they are treating the British public with contempt, because they don't want the change that Nigel represents to happen.
Let me just pick up on your comment about Sky, because it's just important that our viewers know what's going on. We have a statement from Sky News which says Nigel Farage has legitimate questions to answer about the gift that he accepted from Mr Cotterill. Given the clear public interest in this matter, we've been seeking a response from Mr Farage. He's not engaged with these questions. Therefore, we've made reasonable and proportionate efforts to seek a response from him. Sky News approached a property off camera as part of a broadcast pool operation linked to Mr Farage in an effort to obtain a response from him. This is a well-established news-gathering practice when seeking comment from individuals at the centre of matters of legitimate public interest. We can't comment on the activities of others in the broadcast pool, we should say. We approached the property off camera, knocked on the door. The individual who answered was an adult, and we have established that this was not Mr Farage's daughter. We identified ourselves. The occupant chose not to engage. So that is the statement that I'm able to give you from Sky News.
Why did you knock on the door of Nigel Farage's daughter's house? What possible public interest was served by that?
I take you to the doorstep.
Well, I can tell you for a fact it's happened to me.
Did you enjoy that experience?
My children have been doorstepped.
Did you enjoy that?
I didn't enjoy it, but
I
don't protest about it. I think it's perfectly legitimate for journalists to make inquiries.
Adam, so here we are. You're saying that it's perfectly legitimate for Sky News to hound the daughter of Nigel Farage.
No,
oh my God!
Hang on, wait a minute.
What planet
we're not talking about hounding, and we're not talking about banging on the door. Both of which are distortions of the truth.
Let me make my point.
I think it is perfect. No. Before you make false assertions about what happened,
nothing I said is false.
I think that
it was Sky News.
You're asking
Sky
a question.
News initially denied
when
it was 100%
I am
true.
saying that journalists.
How can anyone trust this
I'm
channel
saying
when you lied about
journalists
us?
are entirely entitled to make inquiries. It's not against the law.
Kids?
It is not against the law. How old is Nigel Farage's daughter? I don't think she's a kid.
Of their children. He's trying to hound Nigel Farage try to get him to leave public life by putting pressure on his family. Well, it's not going to work.
No one's putting pressure on his family. No one is putting pressure on Nigel Farage's family. It is perfectly legitimate.
And tired old journalists like you, Adam, who have been part of that consensus for my whole life, are going to have to realise that the public are sick of this.
Listen, hang on a second. Hang on. It is perfectly legitimate for newspapers and broadcasters to try to establish whether a man who wants to be Prime Minister owns 5 houses or not. I think that's legitimate. A very simple question for you. If you disrespect the House of Commons, if you think it's just full of the old establishment parties who are going out, then why is Nigel Farage bothering to become an MP?
Because he wants to lead this country and turn it around. Well, that's why.
In other words, by being
who've been part of the consensus,
hang on, wait a minute. In other words, Nigel Farage wants to lead this country. So you're saying by being elected to Parliament, he acquires legitimacy. Right. I'm saying to you that anyone who's elected to Parliament has legitimacy.
You and your old your Labour cronies. You're finished after the next general election.
Okay. You and your Labour cronies, you're finished. You're finished. He's so so childish, isn't he? He's such a... He just moans so much. He really grates on you. The thing is, though, like, what frustrates me is that, like, the mainstream media journalists, to try and be impartial, they don't really bite back. But I want to see more of a stern defense, because Robert Jenrick is just talking out of his arse, quite frankly. And it's crazy the way that they're trying to frame this. Oh, Nigel Farage's daughter's like a little girl. She's a fucking adult, okay? But they keep saying she's a child. But also, I mean, we're going to show the footage in a minute, but they didn't hound her. They literally just knocked on the door and were like, "Can we speak to Farage?" Someone's like, "No," and they're like, "Okay, bye." That's literally it. But the woke right strikes again, because they're such snowflakes. They call everyone else a snowflake, but here they are crying because the journalists did their job. Wild. Let's have a look at another clip. This is generic on the BBC.
People look at this and say, well, this is just Nigel Farage trying to dodge an inquiry which he can feel was going the wrong way for him.
Look, Nigel was very clear that he has broken no rules. He's an
He's not the arbiter of that. That's not how it works.
He's done absolutely nothing wrong. But
he doesn't sit in judgment. If
the people sit in judgment.
Well,
the people
actually,
sit in
there
judgment.
are rules about how
no,
an MP
actually,
behaves.
we're a democracy. Or at least we in Reform believe it. You might not think that if you look at the other parties.
Well, it sounds very Trumpian, because Donald Trump would say, the fact that voters vote for me, that trumps everything else.
Look what the Labour Party is doing. They've announced they're going to change the law so that British citizens cannot give donations to Reform.
You've changed subject there. I was asking about the rules that govern the behaviour of an MP.
Illegally cancelling the election of 5 million people. You've got the leader of the Conservative Party likening Nigel Farage to Jeremy Thorpe, a man who stood trial for incitement for murder.
You're jumping around with different subjects.
You've got parts of the media banging on the door of Nigel's own daughter's house. Someone who's got nothing to do with public life.
You're jumping lots of subjects there. Does Nigel
it's all the same
Farage,
story.
Is it?
We ultimately
Sky News knocking on someone's door is the same as whether an MP should accept the rules of Parliament. That's quite a jumble.
The establishment are trying to play judge and jury and executioner. Well, enough of that.
Correction, by the way, that was Channel 4, not the BBC. Here doing the same excuses. Again, I'm getting really frustrated that so many presenters and journalists are letting him just speak his waffle. Damn, I wish I could be matched up with Jenner right now. I'd fucking tear him to pieces. I would. Because I said, look, I have a problem with the corporate media. There is massive issues with the corporate media. But guess what? Nigel Farage met with Steve Bannon in 2017, and he tried setting up a meeting between Bannon and Frederick Barclay, one of the co-owners of The Telegraph. The idea that, like, the media are against reform, they're all in the fucking revolving door of the actual establishment. But it just comes across as moaning again. Now, it wasn't just Jenrick having a meltdown. Zia Youssef has been acting very odd on social media. All in caps locks. Reform UK has offered to pay in full for the cost of this by-election. It's how politics should be done. Well, maybe not actually, because that's corruption. He also said this. Again, all in caps. Sky News should be taken off air for their lies. I mean, what is this Trumpian style all caps lock about? I mean, is bro okay? Also, imagine his reaction if any MP who's not from Reform called for GB News to be taken off air. He'd be crying, right? The woke right will be back again. Let's go to the next graphic. Given the receipts posted by Nigel Farage, should Sky News formally change its name to Sly News? Again, it's very Trumpian, isn't it? And also, like, I think he thought he did a banger here, and it really wasn't. They're also, by the way, I've heard that Zia Youssef is like kind of a loose cannon in Reform. He's not actually well liked. Of course, he had his little tap with Reform when he resigned for like 2 days because of Sarah Poacher and just unilaterally saying Reform would ban the burqa. And Zia Youssef, being a Muslim, was like, I think that's too far for me. And then 2 days later, he gave up all his principles and went, actually, I don't care about that now. Goes back into Reform. He's obviously not well liked in the party because he revealed on Question Time last week that he's actually tried to stand as a candidate and he hasn't been picked. He hasn't been picked. I can see why. The man is completely unhinged. Helena, given that people do despise the media in this country, apart from hardcore Reform supporters, what do you think the average person will think of Jenric's media performances?
I mean, true, we do hate the media in this country. I think we also hate bad manners. People being belligerent, like what Jenric was, that really doesn't go down well with the prim and proper British people. In my mind, I don't think that is generally gonna go down well. But even if it may go down well for Nigel Farage, because sometimes he gets away with it, can it do for Robert Jenric? Someone as weird and as slimy and as totally repellent as Robert Jenric? I don't think so. I don't think so. Also worth pointing out, by the way, that the footage that Sky News released, or the footage that Farage released of Sky News going up to the address, didn't show him hounding anybody. They went up and asked if Nigel Farage was there, and the person who was living there refused to engage, and it was an address that Nigel Farage was registered to vote at a previous election. So perfectly reasonable for a journalist to go up there, knock, say hello, get told to fuck off, and then go, right? That isn't actually a problem, which is hilarious. Absolutely hilarious. The barefaced cheek, again, of people so privileged they've never had to deal with scrutiny in their lives, getting mad about one journalist going to one person's house to ask a question. Do you know whose front door I know like the back of my fucking hand, Curtis? Jeremy Corbyn's. I know Jeremy Corbyn's door like nobody's business, because every single day from 2017 to 2019 there were press camps out there 24/7 going, Jeremy, what about Israel? What about the anti-Semitism in Labour? Right? Every single day, day in, day out, they were doing that. Did Jeremy Corbyn say this is enough and throw a tantrum and threaten to resign from Parliament due to any of these things? No, of course he didn't, right? Because he's made of stronger stuff than these people. And broadly, not answering the question, trying to deflect, belligerently talking over people. We don't like that stuff in this country, really, do we? We like a nice, quiet, sensible debate. We're not like the Americans. We're better than the Americans. We don't have these CNN-style Fox News panel of everybody shouting over each other. We don't really like... We like to have our very sedate debates done in the right way. And I don't think people are going to be really accepting of what is, again, quite Trumpian language. Remember, Trump's approval rating in the UK is -70. You know, it's as low as Vladimir Putin. You know, people really don't like that style of politics in this country. And outside of, again, as you pointed out, the reform faithful, who will certainly be happily won over by this because it's all part of the game, I don't think that the regular voters will be very happy to see this kind of stuff coming from Robert Jenric. Again, somebody who is so obviously totally devoid of principle. Again, like, he was somebody who said he was totally committed to the Tory party, to the point at which he stood to be the leader, and didn't get the leadership, realised that Kemi Badenoch was there in the long haul, and then just left it so that he could critique the government that he was a part of as immigration minister on the subject of immigration. The idea that there's anyone out there who has positive words to say about Robert Jenric, I find it very difficult to believe. I can certainly believe about Farage. I can maybe believe it about like Richard Tice and Zia Yusuf. I definitely cannot believe it about Robert Jenric.
Well, he doesn't have the source. And I think, look, in order to be that kind of politician, you have to have the source. Nigel Farage has the source. He does. I know we absolutely despise him, but he's very good at playing the media. He's very good with his words. He can do that. And sometimes he does look silly. And I don't know if everyone appreciates it every single interview, but by and large, he gets people on his side. He gets people to say, do you know what? The media are ridiculous. But Jenric hasn't got the source. He doesn't command the respect. He sounds like he's whining. And I tell you what, no one likes whiners, do they?
Yeah, a whining child, a whining little crying baby. Wow. Yeah. Well, I'm facing basic scrutiny as a politician. Oh, life is so hard. And the weird intonation of his accent. Like, because the thing is, with Nigel Farage, you can tell him when he was talking about people like, going up to his daughter that he was genuinely angry. You could tell that he was angry. Again, it's misplaced anger because, again, he doesn't realise, as somebody who's grown up living in the halls of privilege, that, yeah, once you become a politician, the games are different. You do have to be treated with significantly more scrutiny, and you will get doorstepped in a way that people aren't politicians don't. Jeremy Hunt was talking about this on Sky News the other day too. Like, when during the junior doctor strikes, for example, always had press around his door. Yeah. That's life. That's life as a politician, and he clearly was not ready for the level of scrutiny to be placed on him becoming, you know, the potential most powerful person in the country as a future prime minister, which is the polls currently, at time of recording, look like he's going to be, which is why he was genuinely angry. But it's clear to me from the way in which the Zia Yusuf and Robert Jenric have been acting, and indeed certain other reform figures are acting that we may or may not be looking at later on in the show, that they've been told by Reform UK, Nigel is angry, you have to look angry too, despite the fact they're not personally slighted. Whereas Nigel's is very, you know, it's sincere, they're putting it on because they have to buy into Nigel Farage's fury here, when of course Robert Jenrick is a long-time politician. He knows what the media is like. He knows that this is actually, real, there's normal political engagement from a journalist with a high-profile politician. So he has to make up the anger that Nigel Farage is feeling sincerely.
Yeah, you can tell that's been the message from the party. So you need to go out and be angry. But again, like if you can't convey that very well, if you come across as a whiny baby, it doesn't work. To your point about how people in this country don't like overly aggressive people, they don't like the Americanization of debates. One thing, and again, I really despise him, but one person who comes to mind who I think is very good at it is Rupert Lowe, because Rupert Lowe has that quiet confidence. He doesn't actually get overly emotional, that I've seen anyway. And I think
Jacob Rees-Mogg, Douglas Murray, people like that.
What exactly? They're very good examples of someone who can sort of keep the same tone, but also commands that respect because they have that confidence in the way they speak. Like hang on a second, no, this is what's going on, without going overboard. Jenrick hasn't got the source and he's trying to do it, and it's just really embarrassing. Let's take a look at some other interviews. Reform councillor Leila Cunningham tried her hand at defending Nigel Farage, and it was painful.
Why has the money that he received when he was politically active as the chairman of Reform but not elected, why was that not
Well, because he
declared?
wasn't an MP and he didn't need to declare it.
But he was politically active at the time.
Well, no, I mean, being the chairman of a political party is like an honorary role. He was not politically active. And
As the chairman of a political party?
Yeah, he was he was a social media influencer, and he was a GB News presenter. And that's
Whilst
what I mean.
also the leader of the chief executive of a political party.
Yeah, but he was not politically active. There are loads of people that are staffed at Reform. I wouldn't call them all politically active.
Even though they work for a political party?
Hang on, Tom, we have people working here in the back office who work for a political party, but there is no way anyone would deem them to be politically active. They're doing accounts. It's just there's a separation.
They're not knocking on doors, they're not handing out leaflets, they're not giving speeches.
They're not putting their name out there and asking people to vote for them.
But Nigel Farage, as leader of that organisation before he was an MP, was doing that. He was asking all of those things. He was saying vote Reform.
No, he was a social media influencer. He was a GB News supporter.
He was not publicly agitating for people to vote for Reform whilst the chairman of that organisation.
I haven't seen all his social media posts. I don't. Nigel's convinced, and he's sure that he's sought legal advice. He has done nothing.
Yes. So you would agree, if he had been advocating for Reform in that role, he would be being politically active in the way in which you're absolutely right. The person who's the accountant would not.
I don't know. I'm not sure. I don't know the exact term of what politically active, and it seems to be quite subjective depending on who you're talking to.
Wow, that was so painful. Look, first of all, the idea that Nigel Farage isn't a politically active person, that's crazy. She's trying to say that Nigel Farage is like someone who does graphic design for a political party or does accounts. Like they're the same person. No, because these people are not on show. It's their job. Some people might do graphic design for a party and they can support them, right? But they're behind the scenes. Like Nigel Farage has been a career politician. He was an MEP in the European Parliament. He has been a massive campaigner. He was leader of UKIP, leader of the Brexit Party, and chairman of Reform, saying, we need to vote Reform. And then, as we all expected, he took over Reform. So to say, well, at the time, he wasn't politically active is crazy. And then at the end, she goes, well, I guess we all have different interpretations of politically active. Why say that? Why even bring it up? Like, you were the person that brought up politically active, and then Tom Squabrick says, that makes no sense. So she's like, well, I guess we will have different definitions of it. Extremely painful. And this is someone who I thought, Leila Cunningham, was actually not bad in the media. That was terrible. Let's go to another video.
Security.
Are you saying a property empire?
Are you saying a property empire? Are you saying there's a problem with owning houses? Are we now a communist society where we cannot own houses?
No, but again, you're supposed to declare them. He didn't.
Well, again, is that a parliamentary standards finding?
Well, that is one of the things which Parliament's been looking at, because this is the second thing. By the way, a couple of weeks ago we thought that.
So hang on. Can we just go back? Can we just go back to you saying?
Now we've got the George cultural donation. Now we've got the property thing.
Can you just
Two new things he didn't declare.
That's fine. Can we
this
just
is
go
a subject of public interest. Journalists will ask questions in a free society.
Listen, as a politician myself, and I think people watching TV would want to know. I just want to clarify what you said. That it is a
investigative
200-year tradition to
journalism. Absolutely.
doorstep. Are you justifying then to doorstep doorstep to publicise where people's children live. You're saying that's fine.
But
you accept that?
Sorry, this happens in every democracy.
Sorry, do you accept that?
I'm not quite sure what the problem is.
Do you accept that that is fine? You're saying that that's fine on your newspaper, publishing a young girl's address who has nothing to do with politics. You're saying that's okay, are you?
We didn't publish a young girl's address.
Yes, you did.
No,
you published her house, which is very easy to find through AI now.
We didn't publish the address, really?
You published a photo.
I've no idea how old she is.
You published a photo, and you're accepting that that's
fine. In
fine.
a feature exposing a property empire which had been concealed wrongly from the parliamentary authorities.
You said it was...
That's what investigative journalism is about.
No, but ask as much as you want. But why do you not question the fact that since Labour Party came into power, they've given 138 million of government contracts to their donors? Somehow, that intersection between money and politics doesn't cross your desk. No, it's not. No, I've never read a story about it.
Crypto-billionaires giving money under the carpet to politicians who do them favours, and has Reform not got the most pro-crypto manifesto of any party?
And so you think...
So what? Because crypto-billionaires are right, we're making yuga. They're spending...
What's wrong with...
They're giving most of the money...
Okay.
That is genuinely one of the worst news nights ever. And if you notice at the beginning of the video, Layla stopped herself because she's like, property empire, he's got 5, and then she goes, oh, he's got 5 houses. Like, she stopped herself midway through because she's like, she realized that actually having 5 massive houses is, kind of out of touch. But it was the same excuses again and again. Again, I felt like Fraser Nelson was just so... It was too calm in that moment, I wish I was there, because I could be like, look, I'm not from the media. I'm not from Reform. The media suck. They're owned by corporations. They're owned by billionaires. And guess what, Reform? They're owned by billionaires. They're owned by corporations. Both of you are doing my heading. This is what we need to do. We need to redistribute wealth. We need to tax the rich. We need to nationalize public industry. I'm sure Hannah Spencer wanted to say all that, but she was stuck in the middle. But this next video is such a vibe.
Address, really?
You published a
I've no
photo
idea how
of it.
old she is.
You published a photo, and you're accepting that that's
fine.
fine.
In a feature exposing a property empire which had been concealed wrongly from the parliamentary authorities.
You said it was...
That's what investigative journalism is about.
No, because the priest said his daughter lived there. I'm just asking, Fraser, are you defending that?
Yes, it's a very good investigation.
So that's the time... So that's the...
Let me bring in...
We are all Hannah Spencer. I love how Victoria Derbyshire was like, let me bring in Hannah Spencer. And then the rest of the clip, she doesn't get to speak. Now, there have been lots of claims that Sky News harassed and hounded Farage's daughter. Farage released CCTV footage to prove this claim. I'm struggling to see where the harassment was. I mean, I guess I'm going to say that my delivery driver is harassing me because he came and knocked on the door. Now, Sky News responded to the video. Clarification, Sky News was not at the property at 7:41 a.m. as has already been acknowledged, and as shown in the footage from 10:19 a.m. Sky News was outside a property where Mr. Farage was registered to vote at the last election. Sky News did not interact with Mr. Farage's daughter. On a single occasion, we approached the property without a camera operator, identified ourselves as Sky News, and the adult occupant chose not to engage. we were seeking to contact Mr. Farage to ask questions about the gift he accepted from Mr. Cottrell. This is a well-established and routine journalistic practice when reporting on matters of legitimate public interest. The footage clearly demonstrates that Sky News did not hound or pursue Mr. Farage's daughter. At no stage do we seek to speak to anyone other than Mr. Farage in connection with the story. So there you go. Nigel Farage was registered at that house, so Sky News reporters believe that Farage would have lived there. Now, of course, he didn't, because he's got multiple houses, because he's a very wealthy man. But Sky News didn't know that, and that's why they went. But again, there was no harassment. There was a light knocking on the door. And as Helena mentioned earlier, right, I'll tell you what is harassment from journalists. Them camping out every single day in front of Jeremy Corbyn's front door. That was harassment. Now, as we know, a by-election has been called and no political party is standing. A challenger, though, has been announced. Count Binface. The other parties feel that this is a waste of time and money, and if Farage has been found to have broken parliamentary rules, it would trigger another by-election where presumably all parties would stand. Now, we don't have any constituency polling as of yet, but we have one from Nowcast based on national trends. And as you can see, Reform have 59.3% of the votes, the Conservatives 17.3% in second place, Labour 7.5%, the Greens 6.8%. That is a mountain to climb. Now, speaking of by-elections, Michael Crick absolutely bodied Richard Tice on LBC.
This idea that the parties are running scared. Well, if Mr. Tice and Mr. Farage are so keen on elections, why are they not going to have elections in Romford, where Andrew Rosendale defected from the Conservatives, or in Fareham and Waterlooville, where Suella Braverman defected from the Conservatives, or in Wiltshire, where Danny Kruger defected from the Conservatives? In UKIP's day, the last time there was a by-election in Clacton, it was because a gentleman called Douglas Carswell defected from the Conservatives and felt it was a matter of honour and principle that he should fight a by-election. There are no principles in this by-election. It's all about Farage and his ego. And what will happen is that none of the other parties, as you say, none of the other serious parties will fight it. It'll be just like the election caused by David Davis in Holton, Price and Howden in 2008, where he gave up his seat, gave up being Shadow Home Secretary, and the other parties boycotted the election, and it became a farce. And you know what? Those other parties who boycotted the election in Holton, Price and Howden because they all thought it was a stunt in 2008, you know what? They included a party called UKIP, led by a young man called Nigel Farage.
I have to say, completely silenced. It's not often you see Richard Tice silence, but Crick absolutely had him banged to rights. And it's true. Okay, I know that Reform and other parties have criticised the Labour Party because Andy Burnham isn't calling an election. I think that's a fair question, right? You know, yes, it was a by-election in Makerfield, but everyone knew he was going to be the next Prime Minister. And people were saying, you know, like, why not call an election? Okay, fine. But where was the by-election for Suella Braverman, Robert Jenrick, Andrea Jane, because I think she left and then came back, well, now Mayor, actually, various other MPs who literally just switched party. Absolutely nothing then? Of course not. Helena, all parties standing down, is that a smart move? Like, I've seen that you've said that the Greens should stand, but it is unlikely that they're going to win.
I mean, the Greens have, they're not standing anymore. I was advocating before the by-election that I was pretty sure that the Lib Dems, Labour and Tories were going to stand down regardless. Restore Britain standing down was interesting. Actually, I think that Rupert Lowe deciding that he wouldn't want to get involved and would... He literally tweeted out, it was quite funny. Restore Britain said that they won't be contesting this one, but they will be contesting the one after. Because I think even Rupert Lowe believes that Nigel Farage's potential misdeeds could lead to the suspension, that could lead to the recall petition that gets the by-election round 2 electric boogaloo in Clacton in however many months' time, which would be, you know, quite a farce already. But, okay, my point was that, okay, the Green Party, we're not there as an arm of the briefcase wing of the electorate. We're there because we want to campaign and we want to win. And whilst we may not win in Clacton, like no one's expecting us to win in Clacton, we did finish above Labour and the Liberal Democrats in every single local election ward in Clacton, right behind the Tories and Reform. So it's not like there are no Green voters in Clacton who want to vote for us, right? Like in my mind, as a Green Party voter, as a Green Party member, like we owe it to our voters to give them the choice to vote for us when there is the ability to do so. But clearly, tendering Green Party had different ideas to us, and I would have suggested campaigning solely on the idea of money in politics. And you know what? We're the only party that can do it. The Green Party are the only party that can campaign on money being taken out of politics, because Labour take big donations, Tories take big donations, Reform do, even the Lib Dems get donations from like Lord Sainsbury. And this could be a perfect platform to call out Christopher Harbord and George Cottrell, but also to call out Quadrature Capital and Frank Hester, call out Trevor Chin and Martin Taylor, the £700,000 from Labour Together, to show that actually we have continually had unclean hands involved in our politics for far too long, and to be able to make our politics work for people again, it has to be paid for by people rather than paid for by oligarchs and billionaires. I understand why they've decided to stand down, and now that everyone has done, I can at least see the argument in making it the Farage versus Binface election, make it into a humiliation ritual for Nigel Farage, and indeed potentially, no, I don't think it will happen, have him be unseated by a man with a bin on his head, because that'll be, you know, whether he wins or not, it's not exactly going to be shining a positive light on Farage as a political figure if that's what he's going to reduce himself to in aid of a political stunt that he basically did, as far as I can see, to avoid all of the scrutiny being around the things that dropped today, which The Guardian had said that they were going to release and give him time to be able to respond to them before they went public with the allegations around the involvement of the National Crime Agency, for example, and other donations to do with reform. Because now all the media is talking about is the by-election rather than the donations, which actually is the important thing here. But whether or not it's Count Binface, whether or not it's nobody, whether or not the by-election happens or not, right, Nigel Farage has still sucked up the air in the room. He's still managed to make all of the news media talk about him as a person, right? That's not going away whether the Greens stand or whether they don't. That was my mind. Go, well, now we've got a time to get a national spotlight on us. We should use it to talk about something important which affects all of us. Obviously, we're very heavily tailored towards Nigel Farage and Reform. Like, he doesn't want to talk about the donations. He doesn't want to talk about Sasan Gandhari. He doesn't want to talk about all of the different billionaires that donate to him. He doesn't want to talk about all of the stuff that's come out from the newspapers today. And, the Greens could have used this as a platform to scrutinise him over this stuff. Count Binface may be able to do that himself, but the Greens certainly would have the eyes of the public upon them should they do so. But you know what? Whilst Count Binface may be the darling of the Marina Hyde, Matt Ford spitting image, have I got news for you style era of politics, right? The kind of centrist dad, Robert Peston, Ian Hislop, Paul Merton kind of sphere of politics. Definitely the led by donkeys candidate at this election. Clearly a sphere of politics I do not belong to. It's clear that all the parties have now realised that the funniest outcome is Independence Day. And so, you know what? The people have spoken. Let's get Binface elected.
I agree. I'm not on the gravy train for Count Binface. It's like centrist slop in it, as you said, centrist dad. Have I got news for you sort of stuff. I think you pose some really interesting points, because obviously I know the Greens aren't standing, so it's just hypothetical now. But if the Greens did stand, like, there would be no noise from the Conservatives, Lib Dems and Labour, and it can literally be, you want a people versus the establishment election? You got it. You've got Nigel Farage and Reform, who are the establishment, and we are willing to call out corporate donors. No, Labour can't do that because of Quadrature Capital and all that sort of stuff, right? And who's the guy who ran phones with John Caldwell and all the others, right? So they can't do that, and you'd be right. Like, the Greens can really highlight that platform, and that could do a lot for their national campaign. They wouldn't win, I don't think, but like, there would be a genuine choice. There will be like, okay, obviously we've got Farage, he's probably going to win, but hearing the Greens' anti-corporate party is really important. The flip side, though, is that I'm so desperate for this to be a humiliation ritual. And of course, even if the Greens stood and the other parties didn't, Farage could still kind of say, well, I won. There was a contest. They put up a candidate and I won. The people believed in me. The absence of any party it is a complete and utter joke. And for me, as much as, I vote Green, I support the Greens, I think the number one thing right now is to try and dispose of Farage, and is to try and make this such a humiliation event that the subsequent by-election will damage him. And even if he wins that one, he's going to be tarnished for longer, because it's so important that reform is defeated. But I can see your point of view. It doesn't really matter now because the Greens aren't standing. So I guess we're all supporting Count Binface.
The one point I would make as well is that lots of people think the Greens can't win in Clacton, and I think I would probably agree. But the reality is that in places like Clacton, in left behind areas of this country, Green Party policy is what these places need. And in fact, because we've had so much of the media discourse around intra-party politics or personality politics rather than on policy, a unique opportunity to be able to talk about deindustrialization. Obviously, this is a town that lost a lot of its jobs because of cheap airline travel, meaning people would now holiday overseas, so all of the holiday revenue, the seasonal revenue of Clacton just died out. And now the average age of that town is incredibly high. A third of the population of Clacton are over 65, right? That's why it's so right-wing. Age is the biggest track in terms of political ideology in this country. And you know why it's so old? Every young person who's grown up there has left because there are no jobs. They've moved to London, they've moved to Bristol, they've moved to Manchester, they've moved all around the country for university, for work, for study, for love, whatever it might be. And they've all left Clacton behind because how do you plan a life? How do you build a family in these areas where there are basically no jobs? Because in a world of neoliberalism where the markets direct all capital, in a service economy, you'll go where all of the consumption is, which is in the big cities, right? So it's that demographic shift is part and parcel of the post-industrial north, the seaside towns of East Anglia and the southeast, and the places in the southwest where there previous was international funding that now is gone, and now there's basically nothing left in terms of overall funding. And state-directed jobs programs would be a way of being able to revitalize these areas and keep young people and keep families together. And that's the kind of politics that we support in the Green Party, as well as protecting the nature and the sanctity of areas which are currently being despoiled by private water companies pumping shit into the water. We're the only party with a plan to deal with these problems here in the Green Party. And so talking to the people who literally have to swim in the water on Clacton Beach, good opportunity. That's what I was saying, but it doesn't really matter now, does it?
I find it an interesting dynamic, as you were saying, about the young and old, right? Obviously, when left behind places, it swings right-wing because they're older people and young people move out. But the interesting thing here, there is obviously a diversion of a lot of opinions between young and old people, but where we are quite unified is young and old people would say it's a left behind town, there's no investment, there's no jobs. And I think that fundamental core material angle, everyone's unified. The strange thing here, I suppose it's not strange, but the thing that's happened is young people have realized that we've been hollowed out, the economy's been hollowed out, there's no opportunity anymore, and then they leave and go to like I said, cities like Manchester, Bristol, or whatever, and then they move left. And then older people are angry at deindustrialization, are angry at neoliberalism, even though they can't identify it, are angry at the lack of jobs and investment. And then they move to the right, typically because they're captured by immigration. And that is the failure of what the Labour Party did. The Labour Party, in their neoliberal projects, meant that these older people felt let down by the traditional working class of Labour, have moved to the right. That's a big problem for the Labour Party. And of course, young people, I think a lot of it does actually come from culture. But the fact that they are at uni and they're hanging around with more diverse people, I think there's a cultural element that moves people left, but they also happen to agree on left-wing economic policy. So it's I think there's an agreement there between young and old people. But because older people tend to stay, they're not going to move, are they? They live their entire lives, and young people do. That's where their politics sort of diverges. I think it's very interesting.
And also another point on this one as well. I totally agree. But there's also another point too, which is that there are specific circumstances where people feel aggrieved because things aren't particularly good, but for different reasons that make them go right and left, right? So if you take the kind of the older people who are in these constituencies, a lot of them have pensions, good pensions from when the jobs had good pensions in the 70s and 80s, right? And who are homeowners, whether it be from right to buy or when houses were cheaper. So they have a lot of personal capital. They have a lot of personal wealth they've built up over time, right? They're actually wealthy people compared to younger people who don't have pensions and houses. And again, this comparative is not overall. Obviously, the billionaires are the wealthiest. I'm not saying that they're in that kind of league, but they have a personal nest egg that they want to protect, which obviously lends them more towards conservatism. Despite that personal wealth, their local area, not well funded. Once all of the jobs and young people move away, business rates revenue for the local authority, that falls off a cliff. So they can't actually have the funds available for the kind of investment in these town centres that would make these places nice to live. You look at like Fareham and Waterloo, Suella Braverman, see Anna and Bastani's documentary there for Bastani's Britain. You saw the shop fronts falling apart, the high streets dying. That's a lack of investment from lack of business rates because there are no jobs and no young people. That's a big problem, and that happens all around the area. So they're personally wealthy compared to young people, but the local area gets no funding, and so therefore they want to protect what they've currently got. That's a conservative value, and they also feel like they're being left behind. That's something else. Young people, totally different way around, right? No wealth, no personal pension, no nothing. They don't have anything to protect. All they have is their labour and what they sell and what they, have a third of their paycheck extracted from rent every month or whatever it is, right? They have nothing to protect, so they're happy to throw open to whatever it is, especially for a more left-wing socialist and redistributive policy to be able to make things fairer in terms of wealth distribution. But the local areas that they live, quite nice actually. It's quite nice living in Manchester and London and Bristol and Leeds and Liverpool because these places have lots of businesses. They have lots of footfall. They have lots of consumption. They do have high business rates revenue. Councils don't have as much to spend on adult social care because there's a smaller percentage of the elderly in the constituency. So pretty nice areas to live. So whilst you believe in the strength of funding the community because the community looks nice to you and you build that community, personal wealth to protect, you don't get any of that. So that's why I think there's more communitarian economics out of the dissatisfied youth than there is more individualist economics coming out of the dissatisfied elderly. I don't know if you believe in that hypothesis.
No, I do. I think the more you have to protect, you become more selfish in a way because you feel like you've got something to lose, and in a way like other people are trying to take it away from you. If you have nothing to lose, there's literally, what can you do? And I do think like in that, being in that precarious situation and seeing that other people are also in that precarious situation, you do have more communitarian politics. So I fundamentally agree also with that hypothesis.
Yeah. And you see the public realm succeeding. Where business rates have lots of revenue and the areas are nice, you can see communitarian projects being a successful thing, right? You look at your council tax money and you will happily pay it because you know that it's going towards something that has provided a nice area to live. If you're living in these rundown areas which have been deindustrialised or been killed by cheap travel overseas, and you see that the council has no money, you resent paying council. What the hell am I paying council tax for? I'm not getting anything in return. And they're right. There's incinerated all on adult social care or on temporary accommodation. These areas are drastically underfunded in terms of local authority budgets and were further defunded in the Cameron Osborne era compared to inner city areas, for example, So you don't believe there's any use in contributing to the community because you don't get anything back from it and you haven't done so. That's why there's a skepticism of communitarian politics as well. So it drives both ways.
Let's talk about tax. But before we do that, what I'm going to do? I'm going to do my plug. It's 2026. It's 2026 and we really want this year to be big for Turn Left. We want to be far more ambitious than last year and to really put us on the map. We would like 2026 to be the year where we can have a full-time studio and for our contributors to be paid for the work we do. Your support over the years has been amazing and we're ready to take this to the next level. We rely on small donations. So if you want to be part of a media organisation that seeks to destroy the oligarchs, then please head over to turnleftmedia.co.uk/support. There you can support us monthly on Patreon, or there is another link for a one-time contribution. You can also become a YouTube member for 99p. Let's go on to our final story. Today, Gary Stevenson has released a documentary with Channel 4. It's called How to Get Filthy Rich, a documentary about inequality and taxing the rich. Stevenson rose to prominence after becoming a city trader and realizing that inequality is not only harming communities, but the economy too. He has now turned into an inequality activist and creates content on YouTube, Gary's Economics. Let's take a look at a clip of the documentary.
How many houses do you own? 24. But that's not the point. My proposal is a wealth tax of 2% on wealth above £10 million. That would mean that if you're worth 35, 40 million pounds, you would have to pay a fair bit more. You'd be looking at paying 2% on 30 million, so £600,000 a year. How do you feel about that?
Well, not very good, do I? Apart from the fact, I think the economics is... Because if you start taxing more people, the values which you're basing your figures on will collapse.
So let's just imagine in the future, you know, your nightmare comes true and I managed to get my wealth tax into law, and suddenly very, very wealthy people such as yourself do have to pay significantly more. How bad would that actually be for you and your family?
It would be disastrous, obviously, but so we would probably end up borrowing the money to pay the taxes, knowing that your government would doom to perdition. Sorry, Gary, your life at the top would be very limited.
Okay, thank you.
But we would work out a way to win through, as we've won through over the last
1,000 years.
Yeah, well, we fight to win.
I think the rest of the country should probably try to do that as well.
What a clip. I think that clip really spoke well to what Helena said earlier about, you know, older people owning the assets, want to protect it. Of course, the difference here, though, is that most older people are not in this man's position. This guy owns 24 houses. It's also very, very funny how those who are wealthy, those who have assets to protect, they say stuff like, oh, well, taxes on the rich, that's bad for the economy. That's silly economics. It's like, it's not silly economics. It's that you are protecting things that you have. You have a perspective on the economy, not through a rational lens or even an academic lens. You have it from a bias of protecting your own interests. It's as simple as that. But when you speak out against inequality and discuss taxing the rich, it upsets people. Entrepreneur and public speaker Dominic McGregor said this. This guy, in regards to Gary Stevenson, is seriously dangerous. No one steals wealth. It isn't a zero-sum game. The change in government GDP over time has been caused by overspending, not undertaxing. This year, government will take record tax revenue. Don't be fooled. Daniel Priestley, another entrepreneur who debated Gary on the Diary of a CEO podcast, tweeted, Gary's theory is that the cause of wealth inequality is wealth inequality. In his Oxford thesis, he claims that wealthy people become rich, buy assets, and then use their passive income to buy more and more assets. He also claims that the rich don't pay taxes like the rest of us. If his theory was correct and the UK was experiencing a wealth inequality crisis, the share of the wealth held by the top 1% would be rising. It's not. It's been stable for decades. The two reasons we are seeing issues at the bottom of the economic pyramid is because of technology and low-skilled migration. The cost of housing has also risen. It's not because a tiny group of elites buy up houses. It's because the government had a decade of low interest rates and stimulus, and an aging population don't want to sell their homes and pay stamp duty on a smaller place. We actually have over 9 million homes with 2+ spare rooms. Rich people are not interested in owning a 38R terraced home in the Midlands. It's easy to blame the rich for the problems we see, but the truth is hard to hear. The UK is only surviving because we still have about 3 million high earners who are paying historically high taxes. Actually, just 300,000 people, one in 100, are paying a third of the taxes, and 30,000 of them, 1 in 1,000, are paying 10% of the tax bill. In a country with 70 million people, a few football stadiums of hard-working, responsible, enterprising people are paying disproportionate taxes, and demonize them isn't helpful or based on any accurate data. Now, Priestley claims the share of the wealth has been stable for decades. The World Inequality Database and the Equality Trust report that the wealth share held by the top 0.1% in the UK doubled between 1984 and 2013, rising to 9% of total wealth. Today, the 50 wealthiest families in the country own more wealth than the combined assets of 34.1 million people. Priestley's stable claim relies on a narrow measure of wealth inequality. The Resolution Foundation says this is misleading because it hides a growing gap between generations and a huge rise in overall wealth inequality. UK household wealth reached 630% of GDP in 2024, up from 300% in the 1980s and 410% in 1997, driven mainly by rising asset prices rather than wages or savings. Priestley then says that the top 1% are paid 29 to 30% of all UK income tax. And this is what many people do when they defend the rich. They talk about income tax, which is fairly progressive, or not that progressive, but we have a progressive taxation system. It needs to be vastly improved. But it's on wealth they don't pay their fair share. Okay? Currently, capital gains is taxed less than income. You're being taxed on your work more than your passive income. You know, Reem Ibrahim does this a lot. I mean, I debated her and I said we need a wealth tax. And she was like, but rich people pay so much income tax. You're talking about income. I'm talking about wealth. Two very different things. In Priestley's original tweet, he said that, well, it's government regulation and their interference in the economy is why people can't get housing. But then he admits there's loads of empty homes. So there is wealth hoarding happening. The number one venture in this company, the number one commercial business in this country, okay, is landlordism. The number one thing. So we don't produce anything in this country, right? We don't provide any social capital or social utility. The number one thing is landlordism. There is a correlation between that. Now, this exchange between Daniel Priestley and Grok was really funny. So, responding to Priestley's tweets, Lance Lachlan, I believe that's his name, Lachlan says, what percentage of all UK wealth does the top 20% of people own? The answer is approximately 70% of all household wealth. A single breakdown is the top 1%, minus 21%, top 5%, 43%, top 10%, 56%, top 20%, sorry, top 20%, 70%, top 50, 90%, bottom 50, 10%. So if the UK had £100 of total wealth, the top 20% would own about £70. The bottom 80% would own about £30. Bottom 50% would own only about £10. Priestley then replied with a prompt to Grok. Grok, is there any economy currently or in history where the bottom 50% of people in the economy has greater than 50% of the total wealth? And he got a reply, yes, Slovakia currently has the bottom 50% holding 17% of total household wealth, highest in recent EU data per Eurofund. Most countries are between 4 and 10%. The UK is between 9 and 10%. The global average is 2%. That's not good. In modern economies, this level is rare but possible with high ownership and lower asset concentration. Historical market economies rarely exceed low double digits for the bottom half. Slovakia have a more equal economy because of higher ownership of housing and to a lack of asset holding. Almost as if Gary is exactly right. The wealthier are using their capital to make more capital. 1 point for Gary and 1 point for Marx. Helena, what is Daniel Priestley on about?
I mean, he's trying to deflect, as always, away from the reality, of course, which is that if people did start to implement wealth taxes, him and his mates would end up having to pay higher rates of tax, and they just hate that. They are fundamentally opposed to it, so they will invent any chop logic to justify why things that would justify a wealth tax would be either wrong or bad, and then they find out that they are wrong. Now, one thing I will agree with him on is when it comes to housing, it is not just the over-financialization of housing that makes it unaffordable. The points that he makes about low housing use efficiency in terms of spare bedrooms, the way in which that we have had kind of low interest rates and constrained supply has kept prices high, and that has incentivized people to move money into these assets to increase the value of these things, and stamp duty makes it harder to be able to move around to use housing efficiently. These things are all true, and they're also part and parcel of a privatized housing market, right? Like, none of these things would be an issue if we just kept these all as council housing. You know, if we had mass council housing in this country, or we had mass housing ownership like the post-Soviet countries have, where houses were already owned by people. They weren't part of the fire sell-off of the state that happened during the shock doctrine era of the neoliberalization of the post-Soviet states. Therefore, these people still have at least some amount of physical wealth owned by families in those countries, and they get passed down to the generations. You know, like that is a way in which that you can help people to maintain some level of wealth, is if you keep these things owned by families or owned by the state. One of the points that Gary makes over and over again in his book, in his videos, in his documentaries, and whatever it is in his interviews, is that it's not just personal wealth that has massively declined in this country. It is state wealth that's massively declined in this country too, because we sold it all off to rich people who then use that to be able to increase their asset value, to be able to become richer and richer oligarchs, right? So they will always do these kind of things. They will deflect to certain things that are part and parcel of a failed system, or they will lie and try and tell you that the rich pay lots of tax. Spoiler alert, the 10 wealthiest people in this country and the 10 highest taxpayers in this country, none of these people are the same. There are lots of high earners who pay a lot of tax, right? And, you know, if we did tax high earners more, maybe there'll be a chance they might move to Australia or something, right? The wealthy, we do not tax them a fucking bit. We do not tax the wealthy at all. That is why none of the 10 wealthiest people appear on the list of the 10 highest taxpayers, because they don't pay enough fucking tax, because they sit on their assets and generate passive income and passive revenue, or use them as collateral to be able to get loans that get taxed differently, whereas high earners just get high salaries and pay high levels of tax, right? These are two different things. It's a really easy way of these people being able to dodge the fact that we live in an oligarchy, which is what happens when so many too few people own too much of this country. That's why I get angry when people talk about, like, we need to cut welfare to fund defence, and I'm just like, if we're going to fund defence, something I would also take umbrage with, how about the people who own the fucking country should pay to defend this stuff, right? Like, why should I have to pay to defend a bunch of buildings and a bunch of assets owned by massive international private equity firms, billionaires, aristocrats, and the monarchy? I don't own any of this stuff. Why am I paying to protect it? I don't get any of that, right? But the reality, of course, is that the wealthy do own all the assets. They have been hoarding all of the assets. And the best way of having a broad base is to have these assets owned by as many people as possible. So that means state housing provision. It means increased access to home ownership and blocking institutional buyers and landlords from hoarding housing that they don't need to rent it back to be able to get a return without doing any work. And it also means more cooperative ownership of the businesses of this country, and the wealth that is generated being kept in the hands of the people who generated it, rather than the hands of the people who own the wealth in the first place.
Like, in the market economy, that can improve this, right? Like, I'm not against saying, oh, we need to build more houses. Absolutely true. But I think it's fundamentally down to the fact that it's ownership, right? We cannot get out of the housing crisis if we don't build council houses. Because, as I was pointing to before, the #1 commercial business in this country is landlordism. And yes, we can build more and more houses, but it doesn't necessarily mean it goes to people. Now, of course, people bring in that. We've had this on Twitter a couple of weeks ago, the supply and demand economics, right? And us leftists get accused of not understanding basic economics of supply and demand. Sure, but when you increase the supply, sometimes it just goes to people's portfolios and it doesn't trickle down to the rest of us. So you do need also a state-owned sort of company. I mean, we do have Homes UK, it's not really utilised, but we need council houses and community wealth building. That's really important. Second thing about Gary Stevenson is absolutely true. Like, the state is poorer. Like, it's not just about, like, cash transfer from the top to the bottom. It's about public services. It's about the actual wealth. Like, the National Health Service is one of the biggest resources of wealth for working class people, because it's free at the point of use. So if we want strong public services and a strong state, we've got to tax the rich. We've got to tax the wealthy, because they just keep getting away with it, and they do accumulate their wealth. About supply and demand, again, I really love this because it's been coming up on Twitter. Like, I've come across anarcho-capitalists a lot on Twitter recently. Really didn't think I would. And they seem to think that us leftists don't understand the economy because we don't buy into supply and demand. Supply and demand is, like, it's a feature of a market economy. But I think that's like theory brain when you apply supply and demand to everything and it assumes it's going to work out that way. You know, inelastic pricing, for example. Yes, you can purchase a game for $70 or 70 quid these days. If a games company says, we're going to sell a game for £1,000, that's elastic pricing because no one's going to spend £1,000 on the game, right? So they have to bring in the cost. When it comes to healthcare, and I would argue housing and rents, they can charge with whatever you want because you can't just move. Like, when it comes to renting, someone might say, well, if the rent's too high, just choose somewhere else. But you've got to work in the local area, so therefore you've got to be nearby. The value of the place is down to the surrounding area. Like, there's so many different factors, which means it's not highly liquid to choose between different properties. And that's where supply and demand falls flat. But people like Daniel Priestley, people like the Tom Harwood and the IEA would say, no, it's just supply and demand economics, and that's it. That's
exactly.
it.
And there are other types of goods as well that just don't follow the supply-demand curves. There are Veblen goods and Giffen goods, things that where demand increases makes the price increase because of the level of prestige of the product itself, right? Like that's a thing that can happen with certain types of things in the economy. Sorry, the demand, so the price goes up as the demand, so the demand increases as the price goes up. Sorry, I got that the wrong way around. And other things that change prices in other ways that don't agree with the supply-demand curve. These are all things that happen all the time. And as you say, right, they believe in the economics as if it's all happening in a frictionless sphere with no society around it. And I'm like, there are negative externalities in treating these things just as commodity markets rather than decommodifying them or trying to regulate them to create just the socially best outcomes. Like there is a centre of the ideology of Austrian economics, which is that if the market clears, if supply and demand is matched onto perfectly, then that is an end in as of itself, because it maximizes some kind of Pareto efficiency within the market. And I'm just like, does it create peak social utility? If we're getting all of this growth and it's going into the pocket of Elon Musk, is that a good society? Did we do a good thing there? I mean, well, that's for sociologists and for philosophers to work out, not for economists to work out. Economists can work out how to maximize efficiency all they want, right? Maybe that would, in some cases, free markets, maybe it's nationalization, maybe it's certain other kinds of regulated markets. And loads of economists will be able to sort these things out between them, right? Like, I'm not going to try and claim to know everything about the truth about what things should be and shouldn't be privatized or decommodified or whatever. I'm going to get into the argument now. But the argument about whether the ends are social goods in as of themselves is not a problem that an economist can solve. That is for politicians, philosophers, and sociologists to solve. That is, as far as I'm concerned, what's important here. I want to make one last point too, and to respond to Daniel Priestley as well. And he said the problems at the bottom of the income distribution come from technology and from the problems of low-skilled immigration. Well, first of all, you can always skill people up. Like, the idea that low-skilled immigration is, like, worse than new young people who don't have an education or don't have skills coming into the workforce. Well, these are the same problems. I don't buy these arguments for a moment. Anyway, like, existing workforces can go into supervisory roles of low-skilled migration anyway. They get trained up. That's what's been shown by the data. There's kind of a wash. The reality, of course, is that the reason why there's certain things happening at the bottom of the income threshold is because of a lack of unionization. It's because of international free trade undermining the bargaining power of workers. It comes from jobs not providing the same return to labour that they did when we had a more equitably distributed economy from the 1945 to 1979 era than we have today. You know, you look at countries with social democracies, with trade union bargaining rights, with sectoral bargaining, with some kind of deal between capital and labour, they get better labour returns than we do. We are living in a world in which capital returns are significantly times higher than labour returns are, than they ever have been in the history of capitalism, right? Like, the labour return is much lower than it's ever been, and the way you fix that is by fixing that labour return, pre-distributing it towards working people, rather than just taxing it away from rich people. But it's worth pointing out, now the rich people have all of that wealth, the only way of getting back to an equitable distribution is through taxation. So until we find that fix where we can rebalance the returns for capital and labour, wealth taxes will indeed be necessary, as will land value taxes, as will capital gains taxes.
Big fan of LVT, land value tax. We can break the labour capital divide by common ownership, i.e. socialism. I know Marx is sat right there. We're going to go to our comments, but quickly what to say is people like Daniel Priestley, they don't care about inequality. They don't want to solve inequality. So they'll say, you can't do this, you can't do that. Not because they think it's a bad idea. It's because they don't want to solve inequality. Because part of Daniel Priestley's enterprise is to sell you a dream. It's to sell you the idea that you need this, need that, and that's how you work hard. Listen to my product. That's a business in of itself. So he's predicated on inequality. No one's going to buy his stuff to say you need to get rich when people are having a decent life. So he doesn't want to solve inequality because that's his literal business.
And it's his moral ideology as well. He doesn't believe that inequality is a bad thing. Because again, like conservatives go from these kind of base principles, virtue ethics about what taxation means and what moral hazard is. And I'm like, well, does it lead to social utility? Like, is it socially deleterious or not? And every single study shows that wild inequality is socially deleterious. Like, we know from the spirit level, we know from all the studies that have been done, that highly equal societies are worse societies. The happiest societies, the most productive societies, even some of the richest societies in this world, like you look at the Nordic countries, are some of the most equal societies, right? Like the idea that somehow inequality is necessary for innovation, it's necessary for growth, it's necessary for prosperity is absolute fucking bullshit. It's total bullshit, and the real world examples show this. And Daniel Priestley knows this. He knows this because he quoted Denmark as one of his countries that has done really well out of capitalism because they ranked highly on the Economic Freedom Index. Yep, incredibly high taxes, lots of common ownership, and I'm like, well, turns out taxes are actually a good thing, eh, Daniel?
And strong collective action. They don't even have a minimum wage there because they don't need it because collective action is so strong. We better go to our comments though because it's 5 to 9. Wow, this is a long show. Let's bring in our producer, Ben McLean. Ben, I'm so sorry to keep you waiting for so long.
No, you're good. Although it has been a long show, so we'll try and keep the comment section short if we can. Because the other thing is it is boiling in this room, and I am losing moisture rapidly. Probably far too much information.
You're like Cassandra of Doctor Who. It's like moisturize me, and you're like just a bit of skin, and that's it.
Oh, that is the point I'm getting to, honestly. So people have been incredibly generous tonight, incredibly generous. Idiosyncrasy came in with a Turn Left membership, celebrating 20-something months of membership, if I remember correctly, as well. Michael gifted a Turn Left membership. Dominique Jones gifted a Turn Left membership. Thank you very much. And also, Coops donated... $19.99 and said, I'm voting for Count Binface, and yes, Farage is my MP. Some more money for the studio pot. I did want to say, if we do come to Clacton, it would be good if you could show us around, potentially. I don't know if we'll actually be able to make it because various of us are going on holiday before then, but if we do a report from Clacton.
It would be fun to be in Clacton, but yes, as Ben said, this month there's a lot of absences. There's going to be some shows that are replaced by pre-recorded and interviews and stuff, so there's things going on. And for the money, the studio part, of course, that's great. Thank you very much. I do want to tease something, though. Okay, we don't have a full-time studio yet, but in this space, things are happening or things have happened. So maybe as early as Friday, you're going to see a big upgrade. That's all I'll say.
Let's go. And sorry, I don't know if you wanted to jump in on the Count Binface stuff at all, Helena. There's not a lot to say, to be fair to that one, but
I mean, now it's clearly a fight between Binface and Nigel Farage. Like, obviously, I'm Team Binface now. You know, we're all cheering for Bindependence Day.
Independence Day, yeah, Bin Day, the day the bins go out.
The day the bins go out.
See Andy Burnham posted a picture of him shaking hands with Binface at the Makerfield by-election, going, yeah, always nice to know which day the bins go out.
Yes, yeah. Also, I just saw an MP, I've forgotten which MP it is, but one of the MPs has put a picture of the bins being put out in Clacton, as in, like, put out for collection, and saying that Count Binface is already seeing support across the constituency, which is fucking brilliant.
So many bin fucking jokes.
Yeah, Milky became a member. And The Good Globalist gave £10. Thank you very much, The Good Globalist, and said, Farage's stunts like this and Brexit remind me of this quote from Aristotle's Politics. The demagogues make the decrees of the people override the laws by referring all things to the popular assembly. And I totally agree and would corroborate that with the idea that the Nazis were very keen on the idea of referenda and appeal to the people. Quite famously, there's I think it was from 1936, they held a referendum that only had Adolf Hitler's name on the ballot, and people could either vote to reject or approve Adolf Hitler, and that was it. They love the idea of like appealing to the people, but when it didn't go their way, they just sort of quietly ignored it. But yes, what do we think of like the sort of populist tactics at play here?
It's mob rule and democracy are two different things. So like MAGA and Donald Trump will say, you know, he can do whatever he likes because he was voted in by the people. And And it's like, that's not democracy, that's mob rule. Democracy, you have to protect the minority, and you have to protect the minority opinion. That is why we've taken so long to build society with, yes, democratic participation, but also we have procedures and laws so we can hold even the elected government to power, because of course governments lie all the time. They lie to get your vote and then they do something else. So we need something to protect that. And of course fascists will try and say that you're anti-democratic because I have the populist and the popular vote. It means I can do whatever I want. It doesn't mean that. And I think oftentimes, I mean, actually what Nigel Farage is doing by saying, I think the people of Clacton get to decide. The people of Clacton get to vote who their MP is. They don't get to decide, though, whether he's broken the law or whether he's broken parliamentary rules. They don't get to do that, okay? We've made these rules as part of society.
Yeah, that's important. Is that the thing is that democracy has to work within certain bounds, right? Like, again, it's this idea that certain democratic outcomes therefore mean that the mandate is eternal is nonsensical, right? It's the same. It's exactly the same argument that like centrists and Starm rights will make. Say, well, we have this massive mandate because we won the election. I'm like, off of 33% of the vote.
Exactly.
Like, you don't understand how unpopular you are because you don't realise how much of a default candidate you were given how you've won a majority on the lowest amount possible. In the same way that the certain specific demographic of the makeup of the constituency of Clacton can't be the sole waypoint that decides whether or not Nigel Farage is a suitable politician or not. Like, that's very specific. This is important to be able to ensure that everyone follows by the same set of rules, otherwise society collapses, you know?
Absolutely. I do think it's also worth pointing out that I think it was Thomas Paine said that a constitution is to democracy what grammar is to language. It gives it form, right? It helps shape it and helps protect it from becoming something like just tyranny of the majority, or indeed tyranny of the minority in the case of the 33% that you're talking about, Helena, you know, the minority that we're given by the first past the post system. And yeah, it's something that separates. People often misunderstand what democracy is. Democracy isn't just an unstructured sort of like that. That's never was never the idea of democracy, even among liberal thinkers. That it should just be a simple tyranny of the majority sort of like perspective. There were always going to be rules and restrictions to stop it being that. Always worth thinking about. But we should probably go on to some of the comments that we started. As I said, going to keep it brief, guys. Apologies about that. Baron von Coxlap said about the first story.
Every time makes you fucking.
I know, every time. It's a great name.
Great name.
On to the serious stuff now. Baron von Coxlap. Remember, it's only bribery if it's in a region below 0.9 on the Human Development Index. Otherwise, it's just sparkling lobbying.
Lobbying, yeah. That's a good point. It's like legalized bribery or corruption, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like that quote where it's just like, what's flashy if you're rich, but kind of sleazy if you're poor, like taking money from the government. Like, what it depends on whether and the OECD or LEC and when bribery.
Yeah, just legalized bribery and it's not lobbying, but like or a pound, so it's like that's corruption. It's like.
Yeah, like it's is the most insane level of legalized bribery in the world. Like capitalism, really, which is what's quite funny, you know. There's this social.
Is that your channel?
It is. Yes. That's USA for me.
Oh, yeah.
Very, very occasionally talking about American politics. I will try and post more often. I've just been very busy.
Yes, yeah. So go and follow that channel. By the way, did I drop out for a second? Then my
I think
internet
some of us might have dropped out, but I think we're back.
Okay, cool. It's just about my internet seemed to be a bit flicky then for a second. Okay, so MK said, I'm kind of tired about hearing about it. Yes, he's corrupt. Let me know when someone does something about it. And I do feel a little bit of this. I don't know how you guys feel about it, but I do feel a little bit of like, we do know Nigel Farage is corrupt. It would be nice if, I guess the National Crime Agency thing is a step forward in terms of somebody doing something about it. But it does feel like, it feels like we're impotent in terms of our ability to be able to actually hold politicians to account when they are corrupt in these ways. Are you sort of feeling that?
Well, that's what's funny, right, is that obviously the biggest part of all of these donations is that there's conflicts of interest, right? Even if he had made it public, would anything have happened? No. Our politicians talk about how conflicted their interests are all the fucking time. All of our politicians have absolutely fucking deluges of conflicts of interest, but they report it to the parliamentary list of like members' assets, and suddenly we all ignore it. And then every once in a while, journalists find that the list of members' interests comes up and go, "Oh, look at these conflicts of interest." People get mad about it, and then nothing happens.
It's painful. Of course, a lot of this began with Reagan and Thatcher, and the sort of like deregulation of money in politics from that era hasn't helped a thing at all. On the other comments, Specs Bean Farmer said, join the Turn Left Discord. I will just point out, usually somebody leaves a comment, but I will just point out people do tend to go onto the Discord afterwards and have a little chat, a little group call conversation. So if people do want to join in with that, feel free. And Dominic Jones asked if anyone's seen Sarah. She is hosting on Monday, by the way. Yeah, so she'll be there.
Because to explain, like, because we're all like we're all volunteers, and we have work. Like, sometimes it can happen where someone's like really is like on the show often, and then someone you won't see them for a while. It's just kind of like the rotation of it. Give us money so we don't need to work. How about
that? Yes, so Shaz1993 came in with, if you can't handle a knock on a door without throwing his toys out the pram, I can't imagine how much of a temper tantrum he'd be throw if he had to deal with what Corbyn did for years. I feel like we've emphasised that point quite a bit. I think there's a lot to be said about that, to be honest. With the press turning on Nigel Farage, I did just want to make the point earlier, Helena. I do like your theory, because I've heard you bring it up a couple of times. I do like your theory that they're sort of like looking for a more stable horse to back, right? They're looking for a more sort of grounded horse. But there is something else, I think, potentially. It could be that the press know more about the NCA, the investigation, that they more has been revealed to them than they're yet able to go off of. I don't know if that's a workable theory. I mean, but I think it could be a combination.
The Times have already done this. The Times already did this, where they released all the George Cottrell stuff, got Farage to admit he's nothing to do with Reform UK, and then immediately released the pictures they had of Reform UK business cards with George Cottrell's name on them. Like they were already drip feeding this stuff to try and get Farage to trip himself up here. And like, I don't think that they would be drip feeding this unless they were trying to destroy him politically.
Yeah.
Just remember, like, it all happens at once. Like, these stories are around for ages. They fester until the press realise when is the best time to dump them.
True.
Remember all those stories about Boris Johnson? Like, people knew about the parties. People obviously knew about the parties well before Partygate got dropped as a story by the whole of the press, right? Like, people who were married to people who were best men at people's weddings, who were part of the parties themselves, was eerily silent about all of this until the story was dropped by Pippa Crerar originally about Partygate, and then suddenly all the press followed suit, and they destroyed his career because he was no longer useful to conservatism or the right-wing politics of this country, right? They decided it was his time, and so immediately all the stories that had been there for months suddenly all came out.
I mean, that's the thing. They're doing the right thing for the wrong reasons. No, it's like, yes, I'm so glad this is coming out because they need to be held to account, but they're doing it. That's why it's all happening in a very specific time frame. But the George Cottrell business card was fucking genius, though. It was brilliant. I did enjoy that. It got us. I have to say that's a fucking W for the Times there. You can't believe I'm praising Murdoch Media, but sorry for him to he has nothing professional with Reform UK. So, well, here's an image of a postcard or a business card. Incredible stuff.
Yeah. it does sometimes feel to me that the left has been pushed out of politics to the degree that we're like backing various right wingers. I felt like this would be
state of affairs.
Yeah.
My favourite was when Layla Clem's like, well, he wasn't politically active. And I'm like, he was campaigning basically every day on GB News for Reform UK. It was an influencer. Yeah, a pro-reform influencer, a and Richard Tice influencer, whilst being not just the chairman of Reform UK, but the majority shareholder of Reform UK. He stood to benefit financially from the returns that were given by Reform UK donations because he was quite literally the person who owned the party. The idea he wasn't politically active whilst a chairman, a cheerleader for, a reporter on, and also the majority shareholder of Reform UK is genuinely bonkers. But again, they're trying to defend the indefensible, so they'll say bonkers things.
These people have it so fucking easy, though. If you think about it, they've got a Reform News network in GB News. They've got Nigel Farage and Lee Anderson with their own shows, which is crazy, that the fact that Ofcom has done nothing about that, with their own damn shows. They've got millions of pounds. They've got billionaire backers. They've got, let's be honest, yes, the BBC aren't, I wouldn't say they're giving Reform an easy ride, but they made Nigel Farage's career. They keep platforming Zahir Yusuf. Like, how the fuck are they only on 27%? They should be on fucking 40%. And I made this point the other day. Yeah. The reason why they're not on 40% is, yes, all right, a lot of people are convinced on the immigration side, but no one likes their other politics. People want to see wealth redistribution, investment, protection of our public services, taxes on the rich. They want to care about the environment. People don't look at Reform and go, net super zero, love it. I love rich people, love it. Like, everything domestically, people are like, they're shit.
And they're detestable individuals. They are uniquely detestable individuals, right? Have you ever heard like Andrew Rosendale and Danny Kruger? No, they're just awful people. Like Nigel Farage, he's a bit of a Jack the Lad. Like, he can get away with it. None of the other these motherfuckers can get away with it. They're just really, really uniquely detestable people. And like the level to which that they have been given, like, the BBC have literally changed their coverage because reports show that they're untrusted by Reform UK voters. I'm like, well, Reform UK voters need to get better at trusting an unbiased news source rather than having the unbiased news source be biased towards them to earn their trust. It's ridiculous the level to which this guy gets treated with kid gloves, given what he's done and said all over the years. And you compare this shit to what they did to fucking Jeremy Corbyn, it makes me lose my fucking mind.
Don't. I mean, where's the Panorama documentary on Nigel Farage? Like, the systematic destruction of Jeremy Corbyn.
Like, fucking Twila Braverman's insane shit, like invasions of migrants, like Hitlerian rhetoric towards minorities in this country, and from many people in Reform UK. Where's the EHRC investigation into these kind of systemic racist actions? Oh no, but, you know, saying bad things about Israel, and suddenly the Labour Party is doomed, right? Like, come the fuck on.
Yeah, the EHRC is very busy at the moment making life worse for trans people. They don't have time.
We're the real enemy.
Like
we're the real enemy,
like,
not the burgeoning fascist party about to take charge of a country with a panopticon system created by Shimon Mahmoud. Heaven forfend.
Yeah, fucking ridiculous. So Michael Askew said, paint over those murals, Bob. Now, this is in reference, if you remember, to Robert Jenrick painting. Refugee children? I think the murals made by refugee children. It was in the accommodation for refugee children, painting over the murals that were like, nice cartoons to make it more bleak, so that it wasn't too much of a happy place for those kids. Fuck them kids. And I would like to announce, because I think it's interesting, that at 19:07, Politics UK tweeted, the Met Police is now investigating an alleged foreign donation made to Robert Jenrick's Tory leadership campaign in 2024. So paint over that, you fucker. That's what I would like to say to Robert. Sorry.
Get Robert on to the left.
Yeah, let's go. Let's keep moving because got to get through these comments. A couple of Burks, friend of the show, they run their own show, said, we are all Hannah there.
True.
I did want to point out, by the way, funny. Because do you guys remember the stories about Hannah Spencer during the Gorton and Denton by-election? They tried to claim because her ex-partner also owned a house, but they were living in Hannah's place, that she had a quote-unquote property empire. She was sat there while Nigel Farage was being scrutinised about the 5 houses he owns, and no one's really describing it much as a property empire, except when Layla Cunningham says it out loud and, as you say, pauses. It's just the different standards that not just Jeremy Corbyn but Hannah has also been held to.
Yeah, that's not when the people tried to pretend she was wearing a Gucci blouse in Parliament because Grok got it wrong. Like, right wingers are fucking cattle, guys. Like, come on, fuck on. Like, how do you convince these people? And it's going, I put it into the AI and it told me a thing. I believed it without question. Fucking idiots.
The right wing are the easiest people to manipulate. So easy. The right wing can say, here's a crazy lie we just made. And the right wing will go, yeah, that's so true. Like, they are the dumbest people. I'm sorry. They're so cut out.
Yeah, I made a TikTok about there was a video that GB News had reported on. That was you saw it, right? The fucking like it was so obviously AI. It was like a channel migrant in a or an AI mock-up of a channel migrant in a rubber dinghy, throwing documents into the sea with a machete in one hand and saying like, "This is the end for England."
Reported on that.
Oh my god! Yeah. They fucking reported on that.
Joking me. I know the guy who used to do.
By the way.
I know the guy. The guy who used to do Fat Families. He's like the washed up celebrity who backs reform, that guy, proper dweeby guy. He shared it and I was like, it's fucking AI. I'm not surprised that right wingers online would do it, but GB News shared AI slot. Honestly, the fact that they're still on air is fucking crazy.
The Boomer Reich will never end. We will all be having to debunk like shitty AI memes that right-wing boomers have believed are true. That's gonna be that's gonna be the next 20 years, Curtis. Hope you're looking forward to it.
Can't fucking wait.
Absolutely. There was some disagreement in the chat on whether or not the Greens should stand a candidate or not. Michael said, first time I've disagreed with Helena, this is a joke election and will be used against the Greens when they don't win. But there was support also for your position, Helena, including Adam Reed, who said, like or hate Clacton, the constituents are not getting a viable election. This is a mockery. I think I've probably got sympathy with both positions. Do we want to get into that a little bit?
No, I mean, I did a lot of talk about it on stream last night. And again, my stream chat was also very divided on this issue. And again, I can see the merit for both sides, but at the end of the day, I feel like at the end of if there's going to be an election, there are Green Party voters in Clacton, we should give them the choice to vote for us. But
well, to be fair though, even if they don't stand in this one, they're not. There's going to be another.
There's going to be another.
As Rupert Lowe said, as Rupert Lowe said, I'll fight the next one, so the Greens can fight the next one. So
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's go. And just a couple of comments to finish off. Arthur Bumblefoot said, remember, Nigel lost to a dolphin in 2010.
Dolphin.
True.
Yes, man beat him. That was, he was running to become an MP. Probably one of his first attempts to become an MP, I believe. And
8 times now. Lucky number 8.
Yes, and to be clear, the Dolphin didn't win, but the Dolphin got more votes than Nigel Farage.
You sure about that? Thanks for the clarification there.
Yes, we deal with facts over here on Turn Left.
Okay.
Yes. Shortly to change our name to Turn Binface. Because that's where we're headed. And Becca says a bin face for the win face, which slogans are coming out now. But speaking of slogans, I think this one could go on like a socialist poster. It was in response to what Garrett, the conversation Gary was having about asset prices with that rich country landowner. And Jim Speak said, a rising tax sinks all yachts. I can just see that on a poster. I think that'll make a great little slogan.
Could go on one of our posters. Maybe get that. Yes.
Let's go. But other than that, I'm going to leave it there because we've almost done a 2-hour show. And I'm very, very warm. I need to close out the show. All right. I'll see you guys a little bit later on. Thank you very much, guys.
And just to finish off.
Oh, sorry.
Got one ton of him shit. That was just it just came in though. Just came in.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Ollie. All right. I'll leave it to close out.
All right. Thank you so much, Ben, for producing. It was an extra long show. To be fair, I did say it at the top of the show. I didn't mean it. It just happened. Thank you to everyone who tuned in, and thank you to all your generous donations. And Helena, once again, fantastic tonight. Thank you for joining me.
It's been an absolute pleasure. I look forward to next time. Enjoy cooling off.
No. Remember, though, we are just volunteers. We are working around our full-time jobs. Today was hectic. I was finishing work. I was finishing the script, doing the graphics, getting the videos straight into this. It's hard work, so it'd be much appreciated if you can support us. You can do that by just sharing our content, clipping our stuff. I think we said this before, but if you've got a TikTok account, feel free to clip our shows and post our stuff on TikTok. Flood the market of turn left content. And if you get revenue, you keep it. Like the stream, it helps boost the algorithm, and comment. If you want to financially support us, then you can go to turnleftmedia.co.uk/support. There is a link to our Patreon and another link to a one-off donation. You can, of course, become a YouTube member for 99p. Thank you so much to everyone. And, of course, I will see you on Friday at 7:30 p.m. See you then.